Welcome to Life Stories. What happens when a lifetime of rivalry between two sisters reaches its breaking point? Emily has spent years living in the shadow of her older sister, Victoria, a corporate powerhouse who always seems to be one step ahead. But when a single phone call changes everything, Emily finally has a chance to step into the spotlight. Success, betrayal, and an unexpected alliance unfold in a story of resilience, redemption, and the power of family. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. The crystal champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister, Victoria, glide through the banquet hall. She commanded attention with every step, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor, the soft fabric of her gown catching the light in just the right way. Even here, at our parents' 40th anniversary celebration, she had to make it all about herself. I took a steadying sip of champagne, grateful for the liquid courage. My best friend, Jake, who had been my rock for years, squeezed my arm. "Don't let her get to you, Em," he murmured. I gave him a tight smile, but my stomach churned. "Easier said than done," I whispered back. Victoria was already making her grand entrance, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Oh, darling," she cooed, air-kissing our mother on both cheeks. "This party is simply divine. Though I must say, you should have let me book the venue. The Four Seasons would have been much more fitting for such a milestone." Mom laughed lightly, adjusting her pearl necklace. "It's perfect just as it is, Victoria." I swallowed another sip of champagne and looked away. I wasn't sure if my mother believed that or if she was just used to letting Victoria have the last word. Just then, my father's booming voice cut through the chatter. "Emily, come join your sister. She's telling everyone about her latest promotion." Of course, she was. I pasted on a smile and wove my way through the elegantly dressed guests, each step feeling heavier than the last. My sensible heels, practical and reliable, much like me, felt dull against the sharp, confident staccato of Victoria's red-soled Louboutins. "There's my baby sister," Victoria announced, her perfectly painted lips curving into what most people might mistake for warmth. I forced my smile to remain in place as I reached the circle of admirers gathered around her. "I was just telling everyone about my new position as senior vice president," she said, tossing her hair back with effortless grace. "Congratulations," I managed, though the word tasted bitter on my tongue. "And what about you, dear?" Patricia, one of my mother's old friends, asked. Her voice was kind, but there was an undertone of polite condescension. "Still working on that little, what was it again? A tech startup," I began, willing my voice to sound confident. Victoria let out a musical laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Mom, did I tell you about the merger I just orchestrated? $2 billion in assets." She turned to me with a mockingly sympathetic smile. "How much was your last quarter's revenue, Emily?" Still in the red. The room seemed to shrink. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes on me, waiting for my response, judging me, measuring me against my sister and finding me lacking. Jake appeared at my elbow with a fresh glass of champagne, his silent support keeping me grounded. But Victoria wasn't finished. "You know, sis," she continued, tilting her head, "there's no shame in admitting that the entrepreneur life isn't for everyone. If you're struggling, I'm sure I could find you something entry-level at my company. The benefits are excellent." My pulse pounded in my ears. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "My company is doing fine," I said. "We're actually on the verge of..." "On the verge of what?" Victoria interrupted, her laugh turning heads. "Another failed prototype?" A ripple of laughter spread through the group. I clenched my jaw. "Remember her lemonade stand when we were kids?" Victoria continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "She couldn't even make that work." Mom tittered nervously. "Girls, please. This is supposed to be about your father and me. I'm just trying to help." Victoria said smoothly, raising her glass. We can't all be successful. Someone has to be. She let the words hang in the air for effect. The family disappointment. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw pity in some faces, amusement in others. My father suddenly became very interested in his shoes, while my mother fussed with her pearls. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. You'll never be successful like me, Emily. It's time to accept that and move on. Her words replayed in my mind, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. Then, my clutch buzzed. A message flashed on my phone screen. Jonathan Delgado, call me ASAP. We need to talk. My breath hitched. Jonathan Delgado, the investor I had been courting for months. The same investor who, coincidentally, had just pulled out of negotiations with Victoria's company. I lifted my gaze and met my sister's smug expression. Excuse me, I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the rage burning in my chest. I need to take this call. As I walked away, I heard Victoria launching into another story about her corporate triumphs. But for the first time in years, I didn't care, because I knew something she didn't. And in less than an hour, it would wipe that smug smile right off her face. The cool night air brushed against my face as I stepped out onto the terrace. My fingers gripping the phone like a lifeline. My heart pounded in my chest. But my voice was calm when I answered. Jonathan. Good evening. Emily. Jonathan Delgado's deep, composed voice carried a weight of importance. I've reviewed your proposal again. Very interesting timing, considering what happened with your sister's company. I leaned against the stone railing. The laughter and music from the banquet hall muffled behind me. Through the glass doors, I could still see Victoria at the center of the room, charming guests with ease. She had no idea what was coming. Timing is everything in business, isn't it? I replied smoothly. Jonathan chuckled. Indeed. Tell me again why I should invest in your company instead of hers. His question sent me back 3 years to the nights spent in my tiny apartment. The floors covered in prototype sketches and empty coffee cups. I remembered those moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of sheer determination. You once told me that you wanted innovation that actually helps people, not just makes money, I said. My sister's company is focused on profit margins and shareholder returns. But my software, it's already helping small businesses cut their energy costs by 40%. Real people, real savings. And with your investment, we could expand nationwide. Through the glass doors, I spotted Jake hovering near the entrance, watching me, his expression full of hope. Jonathan was silent for a moment. Then, stop selling, he interrupted. My stomach clenched. I've made my decision, he said. Through the doorway, I saw Victoria raising her glass for another toast. I held my breath. The papers are being drawn up as we speak. Jonathan continued. 20 million. With the terms we discussed. The world tilted. You're saying yes? I whispered, barely trusting my own voice. I'm saying yes, he confirmed. And I've already informed the media. They should be running the story within the hour. I gripped the phone tighter. The media? My pulse quickened. Is that a problem? I inhaled sharply, my mind racing. In the background, the TV in the banquet hall flickered with the evening news. No, I said quickly, straightening my spine. No problem at all. After hanging up, I slumped against the railing, my heart hammering in my chest. Jake rushed onto the terrace. Well, he demanded, eyes wide. I handed him my phone. He scanned the screen, his mouth dropping open. Emily, 20 million? This is huge. I hissed, pulling him further from the doorway. The story is going to break on the news soon. I want it to be a surprise. A slow, wicked grin spread across Jake's face. You mean you want Victoria to find out along with everyone else? I lifted my glass to my lips, feeling a surge of something unfamiliar. Power. Control. Exactly. Jake let out a low whistle. That's cold. He paused. Then smirked. I love it. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Evelyn, my mentor and one of the few people who had always believed in me. Evelyn, did you get it? The news crew is ready. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Me, you knew? Evelyn, who do you think suggested your company to Jonathan? A lump formed in my throat. While Victoria had been busy tearing me down, others had been quietly building me up. Jake nudged me. We should get back inside. Your parents are about to give their anniversary speech. I hesitated. What if this makes everything worse? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake raised an eyebrow. Worse than your sister humiliating you in front of everyone you know? Point taken. We re-entered the banquet hall just as my father tapped his glass for attention. Victoria immediately moved to stand next to him. But he waved her back. Laura, he said, turning to my mother with the warmest expression I'd seen all evening. 40 years ago, you took a chance on a nervous young man who couldn't even tie his bow tie properly. The crowd chuckled. I checked my phone. 15 minutes until the news broke. You believed in me when no one else did, my father continued, his voice thick with emotion. And that belief changed everything. My mother wiped away a tear. I noticed the TV volume had been turned up slightly for the speech. In the background, the news anchor's voice murmured, quiet but distinct. Then, breaking news. The room stilled. Everyone turned toward the screen as the anchor's voice grew sharper. We are receiving reports of a major investment in the clean energy sector. Local startup founder Emily Harrison has secured a $20 million investment from tech mogul Jonathan Delgado. Gasps rippled through the hall. My eyes flicked to Victoria. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Her face pale. The anchor continued, oblivious to the tension filling the room. The deal, reportedly finalized just moments ago, represents one of the largest clean energy investments in the state this year. All eyes swung from the TV to me, then to Victoria. For the first time in my life, she was speechless. My mother's voice quavered. Emily, is this true? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with notifications. The story was everywhere. I turned to Victoria, remembering her words from earlier. Someone has to be the family disappointment. I exhaled slowly and met her wide-eyed stare. But it doesn't have to be me anymore. The banquet hall was buzzing. Everywhere I turned, people whispered, their gazes flicking between me and Victoria. The moment was electric. The shift in power palpable. For the first time, I wasn't just Victoria's little sister, I was the woman who had just secured a $20 million investment from one of the most influential tech investors in the country. Victoria, however, was frozen. Her grip on her champagne glass tightened. The polished facade she wore like armor cracking at the edges. Emily, my mother's voice was breathless with disbelief. Honey, is this real? It is, I said. My voice calm but firm. A murmur spread through the room. A ripple of surprise and intrigue. I felt the weight of 100 eyes on me. Waiting for an explanation. Waiting for Victoria's reaction. She didn't make them wait long. With the grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in the corporate world, Victoria set her glass down and forced a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Well, she said, her voice silky but tight, I suppose congratulations are in order. But the look she gave me wasn't one of admiration. It was one of calculation. I had seen that look before. It was the look of a woman already plotting her next move. Jake nudged my arm. We should go, he whispered. The press is going to eat this up. He was right. Reporters were already circling the edges of the room, their phones out, capturing the moment, waiting for a comment. I nodded, stepping away. But before I could disappear, Victoria's voice rang out again. You know, Emily, she called, loud enough for the room to hear. Success is more than just securing an investment. The real challenge is making sure your company doesn't collapse under the weight of it. I turned back, meeting her gaze. Don't worry, Victoria, I said smoothly. I've learned from the best. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't wait for a response. Instead, I walked toward the exit with Jake, feeling the power shift in my favor with every step. The next morning, I was in my office in downtown Manhattan when the first sign of trouble appeared. Emily. Jake burst in, his phone in hand, his expression grim. Have you seen this? He handed me his phone. The screen displayed a breaking news headline. Concerns arise over Harrison's tech startup. Is the investment premature? I frowned, scrolling through the article. The story questioned my company's ability to scale, citing anonymous industry experts who suggested the technology was still in its infancy and that investors might be taking an unnecessary risk. And then I saw it. A quote. Many startups fail because their founders don't understand the pressure of running a real business. Passion alone doesn't make a company successful. Victoria Harrison, Senior VP, Standard Corp. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the phone. She went straight to the press. I muttered. Jake scoffed. Are you surprised? No, I wasn't. But that didn't make it any less infuriating. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Evelyn. Evelyn, damage control. Now. Meet me in 20 minutes. I grabbed my blazer and headed for the door. Where are we going? Jake asked, already falling into step beside me. To stop my sister before she spins this out of control. Evelyn was waiting at a cafe near my office. A newspaper folded on the table in front of her. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. You have about 6 hours before this narrative cements itself, she said. Cutting straight to the point. Victoria is playing the long game, casting doubt. Seeding uncertainty. You need to respond. But not with emotion. I took a breath, trying to push down the anger boiling inside me. How? Numbers. Evelyn said simply. Facts. Hard data. If Victoria wants to imply that your company isn't ready, prove her wrong. I nodded, my mind already racing through the possibilities. And Emily. Evelyn added, her gaze steady. Don't play defense. Play offense. A slow smile crept onto my lips. I knew exactly how to do that. By the time I walked into the press conference later that afternoon, I was ready. Reporters filled the room. Cameras flashing. The air thick with anticipation. I stepped up to the podium and took a steady breath. Good afternoon. I began. My voice strong and even. I understand that there have been concerns about my company's ability to scale. So let's address them directly. I clicked the remote in my hand, and a screen behind me lit up with a detailed report. In the past year, our software has been implemented in over 200 small businesses, reducing their energy costs by an average of 40%. I said, our technology isn't just theoretical. It's already making a real impact. The room was silent, the reporters scribbling furiously. As for concerns about leadership experience, I continued. I have spent the past 3 years building this company from the ground up. Unlike larger corporations focused on shareholder profits, we are dedicated to innovation that benefits the everyday consumer. I paused, letting my words settle. Jonathan Delgado didn't invest in us out of charity. He invested in us because he believes in our vision. And I intend to prove him right. The room erupted in questions. But I didn't waver. I had taken Evelyn's advice. I had come prepared. Later, as I walked out, Jake grinned. That was incredible. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. But before I could celebrate, my phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. Impressive. Little sister. Let's see how you handle what's coming next. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't over. Not even close. I stared at Victoria's message, my pulse quickening. She was already planning her next move. And knowing her, it would be calculated, ruthless, and aimed directly at my weakest point. But I wasn't the same person I had been the night before. I had taken the first blow and survived. More than that, I had fought back. Still, as I stood outside the press conference, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system, doubt crept in. Could I really outmaneuver Victoria? She had spent her entire career navigating the corporate world, making deals, and managing crises. I had spent mine fighting just to be seen. Jake nudged me. "You're thinking too hard." I let out a slow breath. "She's not going to stop." "Jake." "Good," he said with a grin. "Neither are we." I wanted to believe that. But I also knew Victoria played the long game. She wasn't just after a headline, she wanted to plant the seeds of failure and watch them grow. And then uproot me when I least expected it. The next morning, I woke to chaos. My phone was flooded with messages, missed calls, emails. I reached for my laptop and, with a sinking feeling, opened the news. Breaking, major setback for Emily Harrison's clean energy startup. I clicked on the article, my stomach tightening as I skimmed the words. Sources report that early-stage testing has revealed significant flaws in the core technology behind Emily Harrison's clean energy software. Experts are now questioning whether Delgado Ventures' investment was premature. I clenched my fists. I knew exactly who the sources were. Victoria. Jake burst into my office, phone in hand. "This is bad," he said. No trace of his usual lightheartedness. "The market is reacting." Delgado Ventures' stock dropped 5% in pre-market trading. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. If Delgado's stock took a hit, it wouldn't be long before Jonathan himself started questioning his investment. And if he pulled out now, before my company could prove itself, no one else would ever trust me again. Before I could spiral further, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Jonathan." "Emily." His voice was clipped, but not angry. "Not yet. Tell me what's going on." I forced myself to sound calm. "The reports are exaggerated. We've identified a minor testing anomaly, and my team is already working on a fix. The technology is solid." Jonathan exhaled. "I need to know I didn't make a mistake." "You didn't," I said firmly. "Give me 24 hours. Silence. Then. Fine. But Emily, if I don't like what I see tomorrow, we're going to have a very different conversation." The line went dead. I let out a slow breath. 24 hours. I had one day to clean up a mess my sister had created. Or everything I had built would crumble. I was halfway through drafting a damage control strategy when my assistant poked her head into my office. "Ah, Emily," she said, looking unsure. "Your sister is here." I froze. "Victoria?" She nodded. "She's waiting in the lobby." Jake made a noise of disbelief. "She has some nerve showing up here." I closed my laptop. "Let her in." Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Are you serious?" She wouldn't come unless she had something to say. Moments later, Victoria stepped into my office. Every inch the polished executive. Her heels clicked against the floor as she sat down across from me, completely at ease. "You're surprisingly calm," she noted, studying me. I folded my arms. "What do you want?" "Victoria." She smirked. "I came to offer you a way out." I let out a short laugh. "I don't need an exit strategy." "Don't you?" She leaned forward. "Your company is on the verge of collapse. The press is tearing you apart. Investors are getting nervous. You might not want to admit it, but you need help." I met her gaze. "And you're offering?" She slid a folder across my desk. "Standard Corp is willing to acquire your company. Generous terms. You'd keep a leadership position." "Of course." My stomach twisted. This was it. The moment she had been angling for since last night. She didn't just want to see me fail, she wanted to own me. I closed the folder without looking at it. "No." Victoria's smirk faded. "No. I sat up straighter. I didn't spend 3 years building this company from scratch just to hand it over to you. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Emily, listen to me. You have no idea what's coming. The scrutiny. The pressure, it's going to crush you. I held her gaze. Maybe. But at least it'll be my decision. For a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Frustration. Maybe even respect. Then she stood, smoothing down the front of her blazer. Your loss, she said coolly. But don't say I didn't warn you. As she turned to leave, something inside me shifted. Victoria. I called. She paused at the door. You started this mess. Now you're going to help me fix it. She turned back. Eyebrows raised. Excuse me? I grabbed a pen and tapped it against the desk. You went to the press, leaked false concerns, and made the market panic. But we both know the technology is sound. And you, with all your experience in crisis management, can help me turn this narrative around. She tilted her head, assessing me. Why would I do that? I smiled. Because if I fail now, your little acquisition offer won't mean anything. My company will be worthless. But if I succeed, well, let's just say that aligning yourself with the fastest growing green tech startup in the country might not be the worst business move you've ever made. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then, to my utter shock, she laughed. All right, Emily, she said, her eyes gleaming with something new. Let's see if you can actually pull this off. I exhaled, barely believing what had just happened. Jake, standing beside me, shook his head. You know this could blow up in your face, right? Probably, I admitted. But for the first time, Victoria and I were on the same side. And that was a risk I was willing to take. For the first time in my life, Victoria and I were working together. It was strange, almost surreal, sitting across from her in my office as we strategized, not as rivals, but as two businesswomen with a common goal. I wasn't naive. I knew she had her own motives for helping me. If my company failed, her own standing would be affected. But despite everything, I sensed something else, something deeper. A flicker of respect. Maybe even reluctant admiration. Either way, I wasn't going to question it. Not when the future of my company and my credibility was on the line. All right, Victoria said, flipping through the latest financial reports. We need to get ahead of this before the market opens tomorrow. The stock hit a 7% dip today. If we don't put a solid narrative out there, investors will start to panic. I nodded, already knowing where this was going. We need to shift the focus back to what matters, the technology. Exactly, Victoria said. Right now, people are questioning whether your product works. So, you're going to prove it does. I raised an eyebrow. And how do you suggest I do that? She leaned back, crossing her arms. A live demo. Jake, who had been quietly listening from the corner of the room, let out a low whistle. That's risky. All the best moves are, Victoria said with a smirk. I exhaled. A live demonstration of our clean energy software would either silence the critics or destroy me completely. But the truth was, I had no other choice. Fine, I said, rolling up my sleeves. Let's do it. The next morning, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. We had set up a press event at one of the small businesses that had been using our software. Dozens of reporters filled the space. Cameras flashing. Microphones poised. Waiting for the moment when my technology would either prove itself or fail spectacularly. Jonathan Delgado was there too, standing at the back with his arms crossed, watching me like a man who was about to decide my fate. Victoria stood beside me, her posture effortlessly confident. Last chance to back out, she murmured under her breath. I shook my head. Not a chance. Taking a deep breath, I stepped up to the podium. Good morning, everyone. I began, keeping my voice steady. There have been a lot of questions about whether our technology is ready. Today, we're going to answer those questions. I turned to the owner of the cafe we were standing in. Mr. Carter, could you show us your latest energy report? The older man nodded, pulling up the numbers on a large screen. A graph appeared, showing a steep decline in his business's energy costs over the past 3 months. Since implementing our software, I continued, this business has reduced its energy consumption by 43%, lowering costs and increasing sustainability. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks. I glanced at Jonathan. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. Victoria took a step forward. As someone who has worked in corporate finance for over a decade, I know that numbers don't lie, she said smoothly. The data speaks for itself. This technology isn't just a concept. It's already working. For the first time. She wasn't undermining me. She was backing me up. I turned back to the reporters. We aren't here to chase headlines. We're here to create real change. And this is just the beginning. The applause started slowly, then grew. Jonathan walked toward me, his expression unreadable. Not bad. Emily, he said, nodding slightly. Not bad at all. Relief flooded through me. I had done it. I had proved myself. And for the first time, Victoria had stood beside me instead of against me. But something told me this wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. As the press conference wrapped up and the cameras stopped flashing, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The weight that had been crushing me for weeks, maybe even years, had finally lifted. I had proven that my company wasn't just a fleeting idea, it was real, impactful, and here to stay. Victoria stood beside me, her arms crossed. Watching the crowd disperse, I turned to her, still processing the fact that, for once, she had been on my side. You did well today, she admitted, though her voice carried the same competitive edge it always did. I smirked. Careful. Victoria. That almost sounded like a compliment. She rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. Don't get used to it, she teased. But something in her expression was different, softer. Maybe. Less like a rival. More like a sister. For years, I had believed that success meant beating Victoria. Proving that I was just as good, if not better. But standing here, with my company thriving and my own confidence stronger than ever, I realized something. It was never about beating her. It was about becoming the person I was always meant to be. As Victoria turned to leave, she hesitated. You know, she said, glancing back at me, you might not be the family disappointment after all. I smiled. And you might not be as perfect as you think you are. For the first time. She laughed. And just like that, we both knew we were no longer enemies. We were something far more powerful. We were equals. Thanks for watching Life Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring videos.